We're past the pilot now, so welcome to the Alien Nation TV series proper. I want to talk about the opening sequence for a little bit, just this one time, unless it changes at some point and I'm forgetting. It's kind of similar as the pilot and movie with the news report and various shots of newcomers on the street, but it's more brief and punchy.
And in the last 5 years, the newcomers have become the latest addition to the population of Los Angeles.
Then it's more of a typical TV show opening with clips of the main characters and such. I didn't get around to mentioning this when I covered the pilot, but the themes to both have singing in Tanktonese, which is kind of a bold move. But this song just really slaps, as the kids say. I think we all feel like Kathy in this clip right about now. After Matt's fit and George's slow head turn, I love that that made it into the opening, by the way, is this shot of a newcomer man smirking, and I couldn't figure out who he was for the longest time. I thought maybe it was George, since he has a similar spot pattern. Turns out it's a random newcomer mimicking the title screen in the movie with the bartender. I guess that's what I get for not watching the movie too many times. We open on George and a newcomer police officer named Henry scoping out an area when... Yeah, newcomer blood is pink and completely opaque, so it basically looks like Pepto-Bismol. We only caught a glimpse of it in the movie after a car crash, and it was red there. Henry's injury was only in his arm. That was a weird continuity error.
It's nothing, really.
Henry saved my life.
Oh, come on, George.
Someone tries to bring in a human patient, but the nurse tells them that the hospital isn't equipped for that.
I didn't get a chance back there. Knock on wood.
Look, forget it.
Meanwhile, Matt notices he's losing his hair.
That's a problem?
You think women like bald men?
All the ones I know do.
Yeah, you're complaining to the wrong guy there, Matt. Speaking of, Matt tries to tell George a racist joke.
A Frenchman, a Russian, and a spongehead. They're a boat in the middle of the ocean.
Is this another one of your racist jokes?
Look, it's funny.
You'd think he'd know better after what happened in the pilot.
Okay, the boat's sinking.
I don't like racist jokes.
George, lighten up. They only got two
I
life
really
jackets.
don't
And
want
Frenchmen.
to hear this.
We never get to hear the punchline of this joke, but the way it's going, I'm guessing it's that the newcomer's head acts as a flotation device.
You got no sense of humor. That's your problem.
So they catch up with Henry, and it turns out that he needs surgery to remove the bullets in his arm, but it's a fairly routine thing. Let's see, we've just met this guy, and we already know he has a wife and kids, and that he's a personal friend of George. Genre savviness tells me it's not going to end well for Henry.
Dr. Trenter, this is Officer James.
The human doctor at this clinic turns out to be an old friend of Matt's. Earlier he was seen talking to some other doctors about how newcomers are easier to operate on than humans are.
So to all the so-called purists who are constantly slamming the newcomers, I say, give that a try.
This guy had his own chair in the principal's
They're
office.
right next to yours.
But yeah, as he and Matt are reminiscing, you can see George becoming increasingly uncomfortable.
Hey, you remember that time you pitched that smoke bomb into the faculty job?
Oh, poor Mrs. Butterman. I didn't know she was in there.
I did! We're gonna take great care of you.
Thank you.
Jim.
I'll see you later.
Matt didn't even introduce him and George. How characteristically rude.
He's your age.
Yeah.
He looks much younger.
Back at the Francisco house, silly old Uncle Moudry is visiting, and he brought his goat.
Would you like me to bring him in?
No, that's all right.
Can I go pet him?
He'd like that.
Is it legal to have a goat in Los Angeles? I guess it is.
George will be so upset that he missed you.
Well, then perhaps I should stay.
Stay.
Yes, thank you. I'd like that.
Uncle Moudry is fun. Meanwhile, Buck comes home and he's genuinely suffering from PTSD after having shot that guy. Don't worry, this is gonna pay off eventually.
Is that you, Buck?
Yeah.
Looks like Uncle Moudry is gonna stay a while. Back to Matt and George, they've got a basketball game going against Dobbs and another cop. George's movements are hilariously stiff. Is he miming a goalpost?
Oh. Good try, Matthew.
Albert is keeping score.
Sykes Francisco 6, Dobbs Quintero 11.
12, Albert. You get 2 points for a basket. 2 points.
Matt wants George to pass him the ball, but George shoots instead.
Very good, George. Very.
What are you doing, man?
I love how Albert cheers everyone on. He's so nice. Matt and George are losing, but Albert knows how to help, because we all know how much Matt loves getting help from newcomers.
Look, you've been shooting with a trajectory angle of approximately 45 degrees. Now, as you know, the ball drops at 32 feet per second. So if you...
You don't know how to keep score, but you're telling me about trajectory angles?
See, Albert's not totally dumb. Maybe he's only book smart. And then Matt pulls a groin muscle. I've never done that, but it's gotta hurt. Later, Henry is taking a walk in the hospital hallway and sees what is clearly an IV of human blood being taken into a room, despite that they supposedly only treat newcomers. Oh, you're not supposed to be in there, Henry. But yeah, human patient.
Officer James.
He's named after the author Henry James. I had to look that one up.
I thought you didn't take human patients.
I really must ask you to leave.
What's going on?
Please. It's not safe here with all the equipment.
Yeah, something's not right about that newcomer doctor.
Perhaps I should carry you.
Meanwhile, George helps Matt get to his apartment, and of course he tells Kathy all about Matt's groin.
Do you have pain or swelling in your testicles?
No, they're fine.
Would you like for me to take a look?
Oh, sure, I'll just go put on some clean underwear.
They're like, what's his problem?
Thanks, George. Just blab it all over town. There's a little sour milk in the cupboard.
That's actually kind of nice that Matt keeps old milk around for George. The fact that it's in the cupboard and not in the back of the fridge is what makes me think it was intentional and not just Matt being a slob. Maybe don't sit so close to someone when they're icing down their crotch, George. And definitely don't smile at them. But yeah, Matt is starting to feel old.
Next month, 37. Oh, whammo.
Oh hell, you're not even 40 yet. Quit bitching. But then he asks how old George is.
About 70.
What?
In your solar years, I'm 70.
Get out of here.
It's quite true, Matthew. Our systems are very different. In your years, our median life expectancy is about 140. That's a very good nose.
George appreciating sour milk the way one would a fine wine never gets old.
August.
But yeah, it turns out that newcomers age much more slowly than humans.
So what, Emily's 35?
No, she's 10.
It doesn't kick in until after adolescence, though.
Albert, he's 56. Soft. Very subtle finish.
The next day, George goes to the clinic to see how Henry's doing.
He went into respiratory failure during surgery. We lost him.
He died?
Henry?
Yeah, that was predictable, but George's reaction breaks my heart. He's such a sweet guy, he doesn't deserve to be sad ever. Interesting reaction from the nurse, though. At least we get to see a newcomer funeral? They have such a cool aesthetic.
Kisaka pupnia oliva. Kisaka Steve. Kisaka serpo. Storosiri. Ruskle. Nokriva. Nokriva ke anjon. Damusa, known here as Henry, is now ultimately free.
Henry's original name was Damusa. Kind of sounds like the website I use to pay my rent.
For his essence is no longer with us. It resides now with Andarko and Celine.
When it's time to stand, Henry's widow can't take it anymore.
Why, George? Why did he die? They said it was nothing. They said they would take good care of him. So how could this happen? And what do I tell my children?
Oh god, that's rough. Sometime later, George and Matt go back to the clinic. Apparently Kathy works there sometimes, so they ask her about it.
Dr. Trenter has done more than anyone to build a database of our pathology. How's your groin today?
Splendid. Thanks.
Predictable but cute. Anyway, according to the record, everything they did with Henry was standard procedure.
Tracheotomy is standard procedure.
She's right, George. There's nothing here.
But George spots the nurse from earlier and asks if she knows anything about his case. He's about to give up when suddenly she decides to talk to them. Kathy wants to see their records.
Yes, don't worry. We'll keep you out of this.
And it turns out that all of them ended up having a tracheotomy.
Kathy, hi. What are you doing here?
The newcomer doctor, Dr. Windsor, finds them and says that they know about this and are trying to figure it out.
Kathy, I hate to be in this position, but medical files are confidential.
No, you're right. I'm terribly sorry. Would you like for me to refile these?
No, thank you. I'll have one of the clerks do it. Thank you.
I want Henry autopsied.
Second episode in a row where George requests an autopsy. Well, it did help them figure out what actually killed Tugs.
I am not ready to face Henry's kids yet, are you?
Meanwhile, Susan is at a job interview for a position at an advertising agency. I love the other newcomer wishing her luck. I also love this woman's outfit. Reminder that this show was made at the end of the 80s. It tends to predict that 80s fashion would remain kind of similar but go even more extreme by 1995.
I love your pin. Where'd you get it?
Oh, my husband gave it to me as an anniversary present.
Oh, sweet. My boyfriend just moved out.
How is that her fault, you bitch? She asks Susan's age, which I'm pretty sure is illegal now, but maybe it wasn't at the time.
In your years, I'm 68.
68.
Well, that's roughly equivalent to a human female in her mid-30s.
Susan, we need to reach young buyers.
And that's why, age discrimination.
Would you like to see my portfolio?
We really have to transmutate into teenagers.
She doesn't even look at her work, Jesus.
My portfolio's got
what I'm trying to say, I don't think you'd be happy here.
To be fair, I can't imagine anyone being happy at that company. Back to Matt and George, they're watching Henry's autopsy, and George asks the person to examine the tracheotomy that was done. And it turns out that a specific gland is missing.
What's that?
We're not sure of all of its functions, but it helps regulate metabolism. Maybe it was removed at the clinic.
Why? Why wasn't it in his chart?
So Matt has his friend, Dr. Trenter, come to the station and talk to them. His reasoning is that the hospital is also a research facility.
As Kathy will tell you, we are really lacking in our knowledge of newcomer pharmacophysiology. Every patient signs a release permitting us, in case of death, to remove certain organs for research purposes. We couldn't function without that ability.
Fair enough, but why wasn't it mentioned on the medical charts?
Human error, I guess.
Okay, but all of them?
Is there anything else?
No. Thanks again.
Clearly, George doesn't seem satisfied.
You know, I have devoted the last 4 years of my life to newcomer medicine. You better not be implying that I'm not doing right by these people.
No, Jim, not at all. You know these Tanktonies, once they get an idea in their heads.
Oh, Matt is just begging to have his ass kicked in front of the other cops again.
Thank you for your time.
When George goes to walk Kathy to her car, Dr. Trenter apologizes for his little outburst and invites Matt to a party he's having.
Actually, why don't I just send my driver?
Driver?
Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah.
When George returns, he accuses Matt of going easy on Dr. Trenter because they're old friends.
And I'm still a cop.
Would you be so complacent if Henry were human?
That's out of line, George.
Yeah, all of Matt's little quips are about to come back and bite him. Again.
Oh, you know those Tanktonies, once they get something into their head.
Oh, give me a break. You're so damn sensitive. I want to puke.
Yes, and you and your good, clean, fun bigotry makes me just as ill.
Tell him, George.
I'll see you.
Well, it turns out that newcomers do at least eat pigs.
Feet look good. Gotta stay away from the snout.
Anyway, George asks the nurse if there's anything else she knows.
I could lose my job over something I'm not even sure about.
Comfort yourself with that the next time someone dies.
Keep walking.
She reveals that whenever a newcomer died in that hospital, a human was undergoing surgery at the same time. And always the same surgery.
I've seen the patients coming out of surgery. They all have a dressing here, on the right flank.
Your day was not good.
Meanwhile, Susan comes home from her job interview.
I've been to 4 ad agencies so far, and everywhere it's the same thing. The minute I mention my age, that's it. They won't even look at my work.
They don't think you're old enough?
No, they think I'm too old. They have this very odd fixation about age.
We really do. I once had a job interview where I was asked when I graduated from high school because she was trying to figure out my age without asking it directly. She wanted to make sure I wasn't one of those lazy millennials. Anyway, I love Boudry's answer to this problem.
What age would they like you to be?
I don't know. 28.
Tell him you're 28. That's what you'd be on Tromas for.
I feel like they'd want to see her documentation at some point, but I guess by then she would have already been hired. Matt gets to Dr. Trenter's party.
You've done okay since Belmont High.
Yeah, well, I was a plastic surgeon before the newcomers arrived. You'd be amazed what people will pay to lose a couple of years.
That's interesting. Also, despite him acting like he disliked purists earlier, we see a purist there.
There's a Frenchman, a Russian, and a slag on a boat in the middle of the ocean.
Telling the same joke that Matt was telling earlier. Anyway, he introduces Matt to his girlfriend, who introduces him to a friend of hers, Lisa.
So, you're a cop, right?
Yeah.
How exciting. You carry a gun?
Yeah, we have to.
What does a girl have to do to see it?
Wow, that's forward. A little later, I take it back, that's forward.
Matt?
You all right?
Wow, Matt sure got drunk in a hurry.
You're outside.
The next morning, he wakes up in a guest room feeling really great.
What happened?
Just a bit too much bubbly. You okay?
Fine. Great, in fact.
Also, he's got a bandage on his side.
Yeah, when you fell, I took care of that. It's nothing serious.
Dr. Trenter offers him a job as a security guard at the clinic with a pretty generous pay.
Oh, Matt, it would be like old times. Plus, the benefits are outstanding. You work for me, you feel as good as you do now for the rest of your life.
When Matt comes back from a run, George catches up with him and they both apologize for their tiff the other day. George is there to tell Matt something he learned about the clinic.
Can't you drop
I really
that?
think you should hear it.
But Matt ends up talking about his job offer, which he is considering.
But just remember, all that gold isn't glitter. There are
Yeah.
two birds in a bush.
I got it, George.
And he ends up exposing the bandages.
Were you at the clinic?
No, I was at Trenter's.
George tells him what the nurse said about all of the human patients having a dressing like that. George calls the clinic pretending to be a doctor.
We received a death certificate on a patient who died in your hospital last night. It's smudged. I can't make out the cause of death.
It turns out that a newcomer died in the clinic during the time that Matt was out.
After respiratory blockage and a tracheotomy. You were there, Matt. You had an operation.
Later, Kathy looks over the wound and there was an operation done, possibly to the adrenal gland.
They're part of the endocrine system. Metabolism.
And the spartiary gland taken from our people.
Also metabolism.
And metabolism is the generation and degeneration of tissue in the body. Well, that's aging.
And Matt has been feeling really good since then.
Matt, it is possible that the spartiary gland has some property that slows or even reverses the aging process in humans.
Apparently, Dr. Trenter has been using tracheotomies on newcomers to cover up the removal of that gland so he could put it in human patients where it slows down the aging process.
I grew up with this guy. We were like brothers.
Can you give me another explanation?
When you find out your old high school buddy is Josef Mengele.
Why?
I imagine money.
And all the time in the world to spend it.
So now they need the records of his human patients. But they weren't able to get the warrant.
God, I hate this job sometimes.
But to call the judge a moron.
He is a moron.
Matt is so much fun when he's angry.
Feel better.
But yeah, that anger has really lit a fire under his ass, and he wants to sneak into Dr. Trenter's house and steal the files.
You lied to me, you tricked me, you put that stuff in me. But that's not why, George. Because he's killing people.
So George hides in the car while Matt tells Dr. Trenter he's interested in the job offer to keep him distracted. Then George sneaks in through the front door that Matt unlocked.
Hold out on me.
Imagine, think about this, Matt.
Dr. Trenter basically admits that he's created the Fountain of Youth, title drop, but he hasn't revealed how.
So, how do I get some more of this stuff?
How bad do you want it?
Are you kidding?
Tell me, is that partner of yours still playing Sherlock Holmes?
Partner, give me a break. Do you know what it's like to be saddled with one of those melon heads?
Matt tries to get it out of him by pretending that he really hates newcomers.
Man, you sound like a purist.
Hey, between you and me?
Let me show you something.
That look of disgust. Meanwhile, George comes across a file that appears to be research on that newcomer gland, with a bunch of tapes underneath.
I've taken this patient the furthest. She's had a dozen treatments.
Back to Matt, Dr. Trenter is showing him one of those tapes, a lady that he managed to de-age dramatically, who turns out to be Lisa, the lady Matt was talking to at the party. And now he reveals what he's been doing to newcomers.
Matt,
You purists are a little short-sighted. I mean, these newcomers are a wonderful gift. It's a natural resource.
Is that what you put inside me? Something from a slag?
You don't seem to be hurting. You remember Genesis? Be masters of the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and all living creatures of this earth.
That is so gross, but Matt manages to keep playing along. Meanwhile, George watches one of the tapes he found that shows Henry's surgery. Of course, he gets knocked out from behind. And Dr. Trenter finds out about it immediately.
Cocras net gilimas la digitalis.
And then he asks Matt to accept what he claims is a booster shot as a follow-up to the surgery.
Needles, you know, they really give me the willies.
Come on, man, I'll give you a lollipop.
Matt can tell something's up and he refuses, but they insist. And then drugged-up George, who has somehow made it to the stairway, gives himself away. Matt gets shot in the arm, but Dr. Trenter takes one in the chest, while Dr. Windsor escapes out the back door.
You all right?
I'm so glad to see you.
George, we gotta get out of here.
Whatever you say.
George, walk. I've been shot.
Oh, shot? That's unfortunate.
Matt and drugged-up George help each other out to the car.
You're gonna have to drive.
Oh, I like to drive.
I like drugged-up George. He's fun. Between the guy who has been shot in the arm and the guy who was drugged, I think the former would make a better driver.
Here, go! Go now!
Well, so much for Dr. Windsor.
Did we hit something?
Nothing important, George.
Later, they visit Lisa.
My late husband.
Turns out she has a son who she's been avoiding since she didn't know how to explain how she was looking younger than him.
Did you know?
I don't need to worry now. In a year or two, I'll look like Tom's mother again.
Did you know he was killing newcomers?
She doesn't answer, but it's pretty obvious. Matt goes to burn Dr. Trenter's research, but George stops him.
This has blood on it.
If you destroy these papers, all those people will have died for nothing. This must be shared.
How the hell can you say that? How many more people have to die? Your people!
Trenter was insane. You can't judge all scientists because of him. This might be used for some good.
Yeah, that's what they said when they split the atom. Never bet on the goodness of the human race.
God, I hate that he's right. So this doesn't end on a downer. We switch to Susan at another job interview.
And may I ask your age?
28.
God, that outfit. I freaking love it.
Let's see your portfolio.
And so ends The Fountain of Youth. It's funny when people talk about the movie versus the TV series, they always mention how dark and hard-bitten the movie was, while the series had a lighter tone. I mean, it may be brightly lit, but this episode is pretty dark. There are other examples of white people experimenting on people of color due to thinking they're expendable, but it makes me think of the Holocaust and Yosef Mengele's experimentation on prisoners. Hell, when Matt goes to burn the research and George tries to stop him, it reminds me of the debate over whether or not the research done during the Holocaust is worth saving. On one hand, people died, and if that research is thrown away, they died in vain. On the other, you risk profiting off of the pain of others. So I honestly don't know if there's a right or wrong answer for that. On a somewhat lighter note, we learned something new about newcomers, that they age slowly, and it goes into how people are obsessed with holding on to their youth, plus age discrimination is touched on a little. And of course, Matt fretting about getting older kind of brought the whole thing together. We also get to see a newcomer funeral. I like how they put their writing on everything. I guess that's kind of an Asian thing. And I like the theme of slavery and freedom in the speech that the priest gives. A few somewhat interesting people in this one. Dr. Trenter was played by Jason Beeg, who is mostly a character actor, but he was also a regular on Chicago Fire, and then played that same character in some episodes of Law & Order SVU. I actually didn't realize that Chicago Fire was part of the Law & Order extended universe. Dr. Windsor was played by Joel Polis, another character actor, who played Gary on Cheers. And the priest was played by Robert V. Barron, who is also Abraham Lincoln in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. The director for this episode, Tom Chihak, doesn't really care for it in retrospect because he thought it was a little too obvious. I guess I can see his point, but I still liked it, and some anvils need to be dropped. Next up is Little Lost Lamb. See you then.
I suppose it's rather like humans and dogs. You know, for every human year, a dog ages about 7.
So we're the dogs.
Yes.